So the devs at Sandfall Interactive, who are the creators of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, recently met with the teams at Square Enix in a pretty cool meeting of the minds. What could this meeting mean? Let's talk about it. So the dev team at Sandfall has had a pretty massive year. The first game they've ever made as a new studio releases to massive acclaim from players and critics alike, with many people calling it the Chrono Trigger of our generation, which is pretty massive praise. I myself loved the game. I had a blast with it, although I didn't really like Act 3 and some of the stuff that happens there, but that's a conversation for another video later in the year when we discuss Game of the Year nominations. But from the moment I pressed start on my controller to the very end of Act 2, I was enthralled. I loved the story, the world building, the characters, the development, the performances from the incredible cast, the combat, the music. Such a well-paced, structured game that is a beautiful homage to the PlayStation 1 era of JRPGs. If you haven't played it, you need to play it. It is well worth your time. But speaking of Game of the Year, this game is a front runner to win that award at Jeff Keighley's event in December, and truthfully, I'd be pretty shocked if it doesn't win. The game itself is high quality, but the narrative surrounding how the game got made is something that the voting body who decides these awards really truly loves. It's a game made by a small team that's AA, it doesn't have a super massive budget, there's no microtransaction or crazy live service elements. And it shows that you can make these smaller games on smaller budgets that a lot of people will respond to. And the voting body really loves sending those types of messages. It happened last year with Astrobot when that won, Baldur's Gate 3 the previous year. So Clair Obscur is pretty much lined up for that nomination and eventual win at not just Keighley's event, but probably many other game awards. Although I do think it will inevitably come down between Clair Obscur and Donkey Kong, which has been getting incredible reviews. It's a refreshing, brand new platformer that is just kind of making a lot of people happy and have a ton of fun. So I think it's really going to come down between those two games. Although there are a number of games this year that could be considered a dark horse. There's Death Stranding 2, which is being called one of the best games Hideo Kojima has ever made. There was Split Fiction, which came out earlier this year, which was incredibly innovative. There's going to be Ghost of Yote, which is going to be a contender for me personally. I've been waiting like 5 years for this follow-up, so anything could happen. But I'd be pretty shocked if Clair Obscur does not win. But now the team at Sandfall is getting to meet with other developers within the industry, specifically Naoki Hamaguchi and Yoshinori Kitase. And this comes to us directly from Hamaguchi-san from Twitter, where he mentions that Guillaume Broche, who is the director of Clair Obscur in the team at Sandfall, as well as some representatives from Kepler, who are the publishers of Clair Obscur, got to recently visit them at the Square Enix studios. So Hamaguchi goes on to say, creators of Expedition 33 visited the Square Enix office for a creatively rich exchange of visions and ideas. Now, obviously, we need to address the SKA in the room. No, I don't think this means that the two groups will be collaborating on a project. Although, a collaboration between Square Enix and Sandfall on a Final Fantasy VIII remake would be sick. And funny enough, I made a video talking about this specific subject, but I never uploaded it because I felt like it would cause too much chaos and tribalism in the comments, and I personally would like to avoid that. But my basic gist of this idea was Square Enix doesn't really seem to have an issue with loaning out their Final Fantasy games for remakes. Sometimes it doesn't work out well, sometimes it works out just fine. But I look at a team like Sandfall, and they're a very competent team. They know how to put together a well-structured, well-paced RPG, or JRPG in particular. The team at Sandfall also clearly loves Final Fantasy, and has cited the series as a massive influence on Clair Obscur. Their director, Guillaume Broche, also really loves Final Fantasy VIII. I believe he stated that it's his favorite Final Fantasy. So, if Square Enix wanted to, they could loan out FF8 to Sandfall and trust that a team that knows these characters and this world and knows how to put together a solid game could probably produce a Final Fantasy VIII remake on the scale of a Clair Obscur would be pretty cool. And seeing these teams together, collaborating, lending resources, I think would be a really cool partnership. But there would probably be a lot of red tape from Square Enix and even Kepler in regards to how something like that would work out, and I don't know if either team would be willing to compromise on specific ideas that would affect a Final Fantasy VIII remake. But the idea itself I think is pretty cool. But it's not just Square Enix that Sandfall is meeting with. They also recently met with Hideo Kojima and his development studio. And this is something that happens pretty regularly in Japan, where dev teams will visit one another and talk shop and just kind of exchange their own thoughts and experiences and what they're doing with their games, troubles they ran into. It's a really cool conversation starter for a lot of these teams. And funny enough, a lot of business deals in Japan do go down over drinks and food, which is pretty cool. Hamaguchi-san also recently met with the director of Stellar Blade to celebrate that game's release on PC. So they got to meet up and talk PR stuff, but also just have really cool conversations about development and share that love of gaming, which is pretty cool to see. And looking at Hideo Kojima in particular, this man constantly has people within the entertainment industry and even in the gaming industry visiting him in his studio, just touring and talking about games. It's pretty cool, which I think is what's happening between Sandfall and Square Enix. It's just fellow developers getting to share their experiences and really just kind of geek out over that shared love of gaming and RPGs in particular. But I think this has to be a really cool watershed moment for the team at Sandfall because, again, they cite the Final Fantasy series as a massive inspiration to them for a game like Clair Obscur, Expedition 33. So imagine, you become a game developer, you leave a massive studio like an Ubisoft, you get a bunch of people together from Reddit and within the industry, you form a studio, and you decide, let's make a game based on the things that inspired us, and you release it, and it's so well received and acknowledged by so many people within the industry. That's got to be a dream come true. And then on top of that, you get to visit the studio that inspired you in the first place. That's pretty sick. And just seeing these two teams come together and have a friendly interaction and just talk shop, I think is wonderful. And I think it also sets a really great precedent for fans because unfortunately there are sections of fans from both sides that really crap on one game to praise the other, which I can't stand, man. That tribalism exists everywhere. It's not just within gaming, it's movies, TV shows, books. I jokingly said one time that I'm sure the Golden Girls probably have a section of fans that are incredibly toxic. They're everywhere. But every time a brand new JRPG or a RPG that is turn-based comes out, we go through the same cycle of, oh my god, this new thing is so incredible. Let's crap on Square Enix and Final Fantasy and tell them everything that they're doing wrong. They suck. They ruined our childhood. You guys are washed up. What are you doing? It gets out of hand. So hopefully those people can see a cool post and interaction like this and put aside a lot of that toxic tribalism and just be like, wow, these two great development teams just talking shop, having fun, probably praising each other over their work. I think it's pretty cool. Which leads to the inevitable question of, will Square Enix ever make Final Fantasy turn-based again? And there was an interview that came out recently from Yoshi P that I didn't cover because at the time it kind of overlapped with a video I had just made talking about this specific subject and will Final Fantasy ever go back to being turn-based? The answer is, and this is what Yoshi P says as well, and the devs at Square Enix have been saying this for years, it depends on what the development team making a Final Fantasy want to make. What is their vision? And what's really cool is that it seems like the suits at Square Enix don't force their dev teams to make specific games. Whatever that team wants to make is the game that they will make. So not having restrictions on those creative directors and the people involved, I think is really cool. And it's got to be a pretty freeing experience because now that team can experiment and make an interesting game. And if that dev team goes, you know what, for our story, for our characters and our world, we think turn-based is what's going to be best for our vision, then they will make a turn-based Final Fantasy. But the thing to keep in mind too is that with a lot of Japanese developers in particular, and I cite Capcom and Square Enix, they really don't like to go backwards. They like to be trailblazers and come up with new ideas instead of just kind of retreading the old ones. And I think the only way Square Enix would go back to turn-based is if they could take turn-based and put a new spin on it that is fresh, that no one has ever seen before, that they feel is evolving that combat, much like the team at Sandfall did with Clair Obscur, adding in all of those reactive elements and creating reactive turn-based, which I loved. There are some people out there that didn't much care for it because they just wanted that traditional turn-based. I pick a command, I see an action, the enemy does it. They don't want to worry about the real-time reactive stuff. But if the devs at Square Enix go, we want to do turn-based, and we have a really cool idea on how to evolve that, then that's what they will end up doing, which is how we ended up with the incredible combat of the 7 Remake trilogy. They took the turn-based ATB aspects and found a way to meld it with action that I think works perfectly. Again, it's my favorite combat system in a video game to date. It's fast, it's fluid, it's responsive. I think it takes all of the best elements of a turn-based ATB system as well as action. And it just works really, really well, especially for the story that's being told within the 7 Remake trilogy. So I'm sure Square Enix maybe one day will do turn-based Final Fantasy again, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Those changes tend to take some time, so you're looking at maybe 2030 plus if Square decides to do a turn-based Final Fantasy. 17, that's already set in stone. I'm sure they got their development team already locked in. That most likely happened when 16 was about to release, so whatever idea they've got, that's already locked in. That's not changing. So it's going to be a while before you see any effects of a Clair Obscur or a turn-based idea for a Final Fantasy. But with that being said, that's the video. I am Curious Corduroy. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below about these 2 development teams that are super cool and special, who have put out some incredible games in Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, and the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy in particular, getting to meet up and just kind of geek out over that shared love of games and developing them. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.